Right, so now that we've got the basics under our belts, let's take a look at what happens when we start trading with a foreign country. So we use terms like onshore, which is stuff that happens in the UK, and offshore, which is stuff that happens in a foreign country. And for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to include the households, the government, and the businesses of said foreign country, which shall remain nameless at this point. Right. So now, what happens when the local business decides it's going to, instead of trading with another local business, it's going to procure a good or service from overseas? And this could be something, especially in the UK's case, with services, call centers, IT, payroll processing. A lot of these things are sent offshore. So this is typically something a business will do in order to save money, because of the what I call the human resource arbitrage. It's cheaper to procure labor offshore, and companies here do that by procuring these services from foreign companies. To name a few, companies like Infosys, Fujitsu, famous for the post office scandal, Capita, TCS. These are just some of the ones that I've come across in my day-to-day dealings working in the career that I do. Right, so the company disconnects from a local vendor or supplier and connects with a foreign one. The foreign company then, in order to supply the goods and services that the onshore company has asked them to supply, will obviously recruit people. So they'll buy labor locally and they'll pay salaries locally. And this has the effect of reducing then the amount of labor that the onshore company is buying in the local market, and will affect the amount of salaries being paid in the local market. So that's your trade-off. You're basically moving that labor and that money outside of the UK's economic flow. The foreign government then gets to benefit from the taxes that can be drawn from the companies, from the households, which is taxes which are then lost to the UK economic flow. And the local households, the UK households, now probably have to reduce the amount that they spend locally buying goods and services. Their savings will be impacted. And those, however, conversely, in the offshore country, the procurement of goods and services by households goes up. So what we're seeing here is the economic flow being diverted out of the UK and into a foreign economy, where the households receive a reduction in the amount of income that they're receiving, and the government gets a reduction in the amount of taxes that they are collecting from people in the UK, and less savings will flow into the banks because people have less money now because these jobs have gone. And then, just from a point of simplicity, I haven't reduced the amount of taxes that the UK-based company is paying, because presumably their profits will go up, so their taxes will go up. Of course, we know that's not a straight line thing, but again, that's a conversation for a more detailed discussion around tax avoidance. But essentially, if we want to keep it simple, the company keeps paying tax in the UK, and they will then deposit more money in their bank, and they will pay more dividends to the few fortunate households that happen to own shares in said company. So what happens next is then, clearly because the government is receiving less income via taxes, they then decide, well, what's good for business is good for government, because we keep hearing governments talking about, if we were running a business, how would we do it? So they join the offshore party, and they start procuring goods and services from offshore companies, and that obviously diverts income away from local businesses. This then takes away taxes that those businesses were paying, adding to the taxes that they were losing from the local people that were being employed locally. It also reduces the goods and services that they're buying from the businesses. It reduces the amount of labor that they're buying in the local market because that labor is being provided offshore. That then will reduce the amount of profit that the local companies are making. It'll reduce the dividends that are flowing back to the households, which will reduce the savings of those households. And ultimately, the inevitable conclusion of all of this is households, if there are things that we need to buy, so we go into debt. And when I talk about debt and credit in my next presentation, I'll go into some of this. But effectively, the households go into debt. The government goes into deficit. It has to borrow. And essentially, it's just a race to the bottom. And this is, for me, the end run of what happens when you start offshoring in an economy like ours, which is 80% services. There is no other way of looking at this other than ultimately economic disaster for the country, for undertaking initiatives like this. I think equally as well, it causes a brain drain because all of those people that would have been working in the UK economy now don't have jobs. So I started my career in IT. I was on a help desk. That's how I learned the tools of my trade. If those jobs just don't exist for people in the UK, they are effectively they're being made overseas. And if you think about it, we're in a situation in the UK where we can't even produce cars that run on our roads. They're all imported. And yet, a country like India can land a vehicle on the moon. And a lot of the people on the right will lament this and say, oh, you see, it's all the aid that we've been giving them. And it's not that. It's that we have transferred our intellectual capital to foreign countries. We have taught them. They have learned working for our businesses. And this concludes really this aspect of it, where we really look at the boats, which boats are the problem. And it's not the people arriving on dinghies. There was an article a few months ago where Asda were outsourcing their IT department, and 130 people were going to lose their jobs to offshoring. And so, 13 people arriving in a boat is significantly smaller than 130 jobs being lost. And all of it is around the relentless pursuit on the business side of profit. And sadly for the government, they're desperately trying to reduce their deficit. So any way they can reduce their cost would be a good thing, except for the fact that they're doing it. They're sacrificing the future intellectual capital of this country. And this, more than anything, is for me the cornerstone of what is failing in the sort of late stage capitalist, globalization of economies. And I honestly believe that you could you could close the borders and do like Reform want people to do, and turn the boats away from at Dover or whatever. It's orders of magnitude minute compared to the impact of what's happening, the economic degradation that's taking place with this rapacious outsourcing that's happening in our country. And these jobs need to be onshored. We need to be building capacity, training people. We need to have our own IT companies. We need to have our own IT outsourcing companies. And this business of offshoring stuff needs to stop. So that here endeth the lesson on that.